So we finished up our tour of the top meta deck, so it's time to start playing some other decks. We're starting off with a deck that's not quite top meta but is still quite strong and can definitely compete in this meta even if you don't want to play a NAM Blood or Dragon, I guess. So yeah, it's gonna be Hades Shadow here. For some reason this deck has been gaining a lot of popularity recently. It's probably like the deck I see the most on the ladder even. So yeah, very popular deck. Let's look at the list we're playing for today first. So this is the list that I'll be playing today, which I modified from taking reference from lists of other people are playing, as well as from looking at tournament winning lists and stuff like that. So this version is quite different from the tournament winning list. The first edition we have here is Alchemical Confectioner. This guarantees you a way to draw Sarcophagus Wraith, which is basically the best card in this deck. And then you have to run sort of another Natura card. So we run Knight of the Living Dog. It's just a nice 1-cost card. Rush helps you clear board, while having a 1-cost follower helps enable stuff like Ghoul or your Guild. So that's what's going on there. Now for the main win conditions, we are running Hades, of course. Hades gives you Path to Purgatory, which is at the end of the turn. If you have at least 30 shadows, deal 6 damage to all enemies. Your main goal is to activate this as fast as possible. And then in order to help you get there, you have stuff like Gremory's Leader effect, which is very strong and lets you refund play points and shadows when the first time you spend Necromancy in a turn. And then to enable these big effects, we have, of course, as mentioned just now, Sarcophagus Wraith, the best card in this deck, probably. For 3 cost, you get like 6 shadows and 2 card draw as well as 2 healing, so there's a lot going on for this card. And then other than that, the less common cards that I run, I guess, Friends Forever. I think it's quite popular now, even though it's not in the tournament winning list version. This deck just lets you, this card just gives you a way to block damage coming to your face with Fleeting Joy, especially against Dragon. It gives you a much better matchup against Dragon, so that's why I run it. And then finally, Grudge Knight, just a useful piece of healing and ward. Sometimes this will help you win games when survive the one extra turn you need to finish your opponent off. So yeah, that's the list we're playing for today. Let's look at some games. Our first match here is against Blood, and we are going first. I will start off by saying that this deck has a pretty bad matchup into Blood. You need to get pretty lucky, and you need to go first to win like with any level of consistency. Your only other hope if you're going second, for example, is if your opponent just completely bricks. Yeah, for the mulligan, usually look for stuff that will help you get to Hades as fast as possible. So you have a card draw like Demonic Procession, Sark Wraith. You can also keep the core against slower matchups, or if you're going first, if your team can afford to. And conversely, if you're going into a matchup that's quite fast and you need early pressure presence, you can keep stuff like Ginsetsu, who can help you clear board early, as you can see here. Of course, Sark Wraith is the best card. You can also consider keeping Alchemical Confectioner to more reliably hit your Sarcophagus Wraith. But at 3 costs for only 1 shadow, it's not very efficient for your Gremory count, I guess. Your first goal is generally to activate Gremory before you start worrying about Hades, because Gremory will usually be active on the turn you manage to activate Hades. So of course you just draw into your deck as much as possible while generating shadows and answering your board. You still have to balance between these 3 things, which can make this deck a bit difficult to navigate, but once you get used to it, it's not too bad. You do have a very weak early game though, so sometimes if your opponent has a strong early game, you just have to sit there and sort of let yourself get punched, which is why these matchups end up being bad for this deck. Against Blood specifically, they have Ravening Corruption and the Mecha Shot Devil, which are both 5 health followers after evolving, which is very annoying for this deck because the only way of clearing them really is Jack Shovel Gravedigger. So definitely have to watch out for those cards and pay attention that you have a way to clear those when you know they're coming. So here we just go ahead and play Jack Shovel and Sark Wraith as well. You go ahead and trade off this little thing. And then we can use the Guild to get rid of the Sark Wraith so we can get full value of Jack Shovel. Jack Shovel is your one of the best enablers for your shadows in this deck, of course, because she summons so many followers for free. She also helps you clear any follower you want because she comes with Bane. So my opponent's Ravening Corruption, so they do have it, which is very unfortunate for us. And they have Harbour Mercenary as well. So thankfully though we are at enough shadows that Gremory will invoke, so we can get Gremory invoke here. And we do have a nice big Necromancy follower to make use of it as well. So we go ahead and summon the Shuten Doji here and evolve him. Unfortunately we don't really have any cards to pair along with Shuten Doji, so we do have to waste the 3 play points there. But it's probably fine. We can go ahead and accelerate Hades here, and Hades will deal some damage. And then next time we can use the second Hades to hit 12 damage, and if my opponent heals, we can use a Storm of Shuten Doji hopefully to finish the game either way. So there's that. And my opponent leaves Shuten Doji alive here, so we can just go ahead and play our Shuten Doji from hand, and it'll get Storm from the effect. We can evolve Shuten Doji here. And then we just trade them and then accelerate Hades for a nice lethal. So yeah, a pretty lucky game I guess, which is why I managed to actually win. Our next game here is against Shadow, and we are going second. Shadow has quite a few decks they can play, but if this is the mirror match, going first is of course favored, but it's honestly not as favored as just drawing better, so that's usually what decides the game. You can see generally I don't keep Guild or Ghoul even though they draw cards because they require another follower to be active, so not super reliable. Go ahead and bury the Miyako here to draw into our deck. We keep the Knight of the Living Dog here in case we need the Rush for something later on, which is entirely possible. Okay, we go ahead and play Knight of the Living Dog here. We end up using it for Guild anyway, so I guess it didn't really matter, but oh well. It's Knight of the Living Dog is slightly better off being summoned or Proof of Friendship anyway, so getting Knight of the Living Dog destroyed is not too bad. So here we go ahead and set up Phantasmal Core. As I said before, this deck's early game is very weak, so that applies to my opponent as well. So we can sort of just get away with just dropping Phantasmal Core here and picking up a big chunk of shadows off of it. And here we want to deny my opponent shadows as much as possible, so we deny them the opportunity to make use of a Gravedigger for full value by evolving the Grudge Knight here and then playing Ghoul. This locks their butt while healing myself back up so that we don't die too fast either. Opponent will go ahead and drop Sidegrave into Knight of the Living Dog here, which is quite strong for them, I suppose. They do get a Sarcophagus Wraith to activate. For us, we can go ahead and drop the Sidegrave as well. And then we can do the same thing as them and play Knight of the Living Dog. They do get rid of the Sidegrave as well, just to again lock their board as well as draw into our deck. When we trade Knight of the Living Dog, you can see this puts us at exactly 21 shadows, so this guarantees Gremory's invoke, so that's the goal here. My opponent goes for Hades, which is completely fine, because they have nowhere near enough shadows. Meanwhile, we can invoke Gremory here. Go ahead and drop the Phantasmal Core and then Legendary Skeleton, which will pop the core for 10 shadows as well as we'll get those shadows refunded. We can go ahead and accelerate Hades here and they will be active, so we can start dealing damage to my opponent with my PTP. You can see we have 2 more Hades in hand as well, so this is basically a 1 game from here, I think. They might be able to barely get Gremory to invoke next turn, but it's probably going to be too late by then, so you can see what a high roll of this deck looks like here, I guess. High rolling is very valuable in the mirror, of course, because as I said earlier, the mirror is determined by who draws better. Got Legendary Skeleton here, we can use that to refund our play points, so we go ahead and draw into our deck first. But we do pick our Shuten Doji, which is good to get his effect activated, so we just go ahead and evolve the Shuten Doji here. And now we can accelerate Hades. And this will do 12 damage to my opponent. So this, they know they can't win, so they just concede. And our last game here is against Dragon. You may be thinking to yourself that the past like 3 videos have the exact same 3 matchups, and that's because that's the only decks I ever find on the ladder anyway, so can't really help you there. So in this case, we just keep Sidegrave and just look for some more card draw. We're going first, so despite the amount of card draw in this deck, there is actually a tendency for this deck to break pretty badly sometimes, so looking for card draw proactively is quite valuable. This opponent's deck, Natura Dragon, doesn't have the best early game either, so we can afford to be a bit more greedy with our card draw instead of having to keep cards for the early game. So there's the Oracle, which is fine. We can just go ahead and drop the Sarcophagus Wraith here and pass. help us draw into our deck next turn if they play a follower. They do drop a Draconic card, so there is no follower here for me to trade my Sidegrave into, I guess, which is a bit unfortunate, but it's fine. We do want to save this Jack Shovel for the evolve effect, so in this case we just start lining up followers. The board it's not really much board pressure, we're unlikely to go face with all of them anyway. But the point is to line up followers to convert them into shadows while we have the play points to do so. Because again, picking up shadows is the main win color for this deck. We can draw into our deck. My opponent has a Valdane here. Valdane is usually annoying to clear, but we have a bunch of followers and we do have Jack Shuffle as well. So first we draw into our deck here. We use Procession to draw even more. Pick out a guild so we can go ahead and use that to draw even more. We don't have to worry about losing our followers because we can just use Jack Shovel to clear the Valdane here. So that's the plan. Here if my opponent clears all my followers, I do get a Gremory Invoke next turn, but it's unlikely that they will, so we're looking at a turn 7 Gremory Invoke plus Hades activation, which is good enough, I think. Usually, I mean turn 6 is obviously better, but sometimes you just have to go turn 7 instead. My opponent will evolve the Steel Storm Dragon Newt here. They do have well, they don't have that many cards, so even if they do have the NAM, it's not going to be a super strong NAM. But they do expand their hand here with the Velociraptor as well, so that's a bit scary, I suppose. Go ahead and trade off our followers here, and then we can go ahead and play the Jack Shovel for full value. There is no real need to force Phantasmal Horror to activate this turn, so we don't really bother. Just put it for next turn since we're gonna play Legendary Skeleton next turn anyway, so well, we don't necessarily have to play Legendary Skeleton even. We can just play this to get it out of our hand now. Convert it into shadows later on. Having extra shadows seems redundant beyond 30, but it actually does have some applications. Like you can do things like play Shuten Doji, evolve him, and then play a skeleton, the Legendary Skeleton after to storm an opponent for 5 damage, which is relevant, so getting the extra shadows is not too bad. Here though, you see my opponent is just cooking with their NAM, drawing to their deck. We will take a bunch of damage from Valdane's effect here, go down to 12, which is a bit low but not too low that we can't do anything here. Go ahead and trade off these assembly droids to make space. And then we can go ahead and play Friends Forever. Friends Forever, importantly, it is Necromancy 4, so when you play it, you will still spend 1 play point, as you can see here. On turn 7 though, you can just play Friends Forever into Hades, and we had just enough shadows to hit a PTP active anyway, so we didn't really need to play the skeleton, the Legendary Skeleton here. So we just heal instead to try to heal out our opponent's lethal range. Next time we have Hades, Skeleton, Hades for 18 damage, so unless they heal all the way out of range, we should be fine. And assuming they do manage to survive somehow, or we didn't if we didn't have lethal here, we do have Fleeting Joy to block the a large chunk of Shadow's Corrosion. It'll only deal 5 damage from, which is, I guess, fine. This doesn't have too much Storm. I guess they have a Wildfire Tyrannosaurus, which you might have to watch out for if you're in this position and you don't have lethal. But we just have lethal here, so it doesn't really matter. So we can play Legendary Skeleton here and then just drop the Hades, and this is 18 damage. So that's it for this game. So those are all the games I have for you today. I think this deck is probably the hardest deck I've played in this throwback so far. It takes a bit to get used to it, to learn when to play certain cards and when not to, because you might need to save them for something. And you actually have to think about how to mulligan and navigate different matchups. So yeah, if you don't want a deck that plays itself, I guess you can play this deck. Although once you get used to it, you can play it pretty fast, I guess. Anyway, it's a pretty strong deck. It has some obvious weaknesses, but I used it to finish my Grandmaster climb, so it's definitely good enough to climb if that's all you want, especially if you really like to play Shadow, I guess. Anyway, that's it for today. See you next time. Bye bye.